Hi, this is Jeremy Cairney, bringing you the Cairney genealogical update for summer of 2017. So just a few things I want to kind of talk about today. We're going to go into the family origins, a little bit talk about where you can find more information, and then if you want to get involved, I can give you some more pointers to that also. So here we have a nice picture of Bob and Irene, which most of us probably know. So, family origins, some of the things that we get asked a lot. So, are Carneys Scottish or Irish? We'll dig into that. How far back does our lineage go? What do we really know? Do we have distant relatives in these places? So, jumping right in, are Carneys Scottish or Irish? Truth is, we don't really know. We have ancestors that lived in both Scotland and Ireland. We'll retrace some of those footsteps. Also had some ancestors that lived in Canada. Not a lot of us running around asking for Canadian, though. So, are Cairney Scottish or Irish? Dr. Chris Cairney has a really good website. You should go out there, look at it. It won't take you very long. You'll either be overwhelmed by all the information and never go back there again, or it'll whet your appetite and you will get the bug, which is kind of what happened to me. A few facts from that site. Number one, Cairney is a Scots word, so the spelling of it is distinctively Scots, which means it's really from Scotland. It emerged in the written record about 1650 to 1850, so somewhere in that 200-year period. A couple other facts about us. We do have history in County Donegal, which is in Ireland. We'll explore that in a little bit more detail. And the Cairney name has been historically linked with Clan Leslie, which is a Scottish lowland clan. Over here on the left with the rampant griffin is the clan crest of Clan Leslie. So we don't necessarily have historical linkage with any Irish clans, but we do, or the name, I should say, the name Cairney has linkage with a Scottish clan. So take that as you will. Point is, we just don't know. Um, so getting into some science, my father Patrick actually did some DNA analysis. Ancestry.com, I'm sure you've seen the commercials. They have kits where you can do this ancestry analysis or this DNA analysis, and these are the results that came in from his analysis. As you see right here in this yellow part of the graph, 68% of his DNA is shared with people who thousands of years ago um, um, were residents of Ireland. So there you go, we're Irish, right? Well, sort of. If you look a little bit more closely, Ancestry does a little bit of explanation here, and the general consensus is that when we say that somebody is of Irish descent, or just of they have asserted here about my father's DNA, this is basically people that were from Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. So from a DNA analysis standpoint, there's really no great way to distinguish between peoples of this area from Ireland, Scotland, or Wales. So it doesn't really help us with the question of whether we're Scottish or Irish, but um, our ancestors came from the British Isles, so we got that going for us. So that's what science is telling us. So how far back can we trace our lineage? We'll go through some of this in a little bit, but we can trace our ancestors back to Ireland in about the mid 1700s with a high degree of certainty. We've got some handwritten records that put us back there, and we found some other corroborating documentation as well. And we're starting to edge a little bit past that, but really the record is kind of murky past the mid 1700s. And these stories are very interesting as well. We'll talk just about Carneys today, but we could talk at length about our Kerwin, Garin, and Dwyer ancestors as well, and other trees also. So obviously, the Garins and Dwyers is going back from Irene Carney, my grandmother, and we're not even going to touch on that today. So there's just a lot that we can talk about, perhaps in a future session. So going down the Cairney line, we saw the picture of Bob and Irene, and this is Bob, my grandfather, Robert Joseph Cairney, and we can see where we can kind of trace back the family line, his father Al, and then up to John James Cairney, and then this interesting fella who we'll spend a little bit more time on later, James J. Cairney, and he's interesting just because he I guess did the most moving around transcontinentally. So we think also, or we actually have a pretty good record that goes back to his father being Hugh Cairney, and perhaps, and there's Hugh right here, did a little jump. Here's Hugh on the left. We think that we're pretty certain, I guess, that his father John was in the was living in Ireland, born towards the end of the 18th century. And we have some circumstantial evidence that places a guy named Ed Cairney there, who could have been his father, simply because he was the only Cairney around in the record of that time. But who knows? So we don't have a lot of strong evidence on that. So I talked a little bit about James J. Cairney. He's interesting because born in Ireland in 1835, and you can see right here, he died in Morris, Minnesota. And I think most of us are kind of cognizant that we've got a lot of family history in the Minnesota area. And James was actually a guy who was born in Ireland, moved to Scotland, immigrated from Scotland to Canada, made his way down from Canada to Minnesota, and that's put down roots there, and that's sort of gave rise to all of us Cairneys. So interesting, and we'll dig into that a little bit. And I also want to point out, this is an Ancestry.com page that we have put together based on a lot of things, information that, family, oral tradition, and history, what we have been able to find through all of the research that's available the resources that are available on Ancestry.com, things like land records, immigration records, census records, that kind of stuff. And this is all, you can go out there and peruse this. This is something that my father, Patrick, and I have put together, and we'll kind of show you how to do that at the end. But it's kind of fun to get into. But again, just like the Cairneys.org site, it's really easy to kind of get overwhelmed and kind of get lost in there. But maybe it's just something you do once a year, every summer. Looking at a little bit more information here, and it will take you down. This is again about James J. Cairney. You see, he was married, and you can see he came to Renfrew, Canada there, which is a place that we'd like to visit sometime, but haven't gone to yet. So I love maps, so let's talk a little bit about where James came from here. So this is Ireland here on the left, and in the north of Ireland, we got this little pointy thing up there, not Northern Ireland, but to the north of Northern Ireland. This place called Inishowen. I always think it looks like a shark. It's that thing that's circled right there. And Inishowen is actually part of County Donegal. So basically that, that red circled part and the left part is County Donegal, the left green part there. And this is the area where James Cairney, who was born in 1835, and as far as his father, this is kind of the area that we've been able to place them in. And so Inishowen is actually you see the Irish spelling up there, Inishowen, actually named for a guy named Owen, who was the son of Niall of the Nine Hostages. And you can, of course, go off and read about him as well. So the area that we've placed our ancestors to is from the Moville Lower Parish. And you see Moville here on the right, that's a town. But the Inishowen area is actually divided up into parishes, similarly to how we've got in the U.S. We have a county maybe divided up into townships, little local areas of government. So Moville Lower Parish is on the right side, or the east side of Inishowen. You see it lit up there in red there. That is Moville Lower Parish, and through the magic of Google Earth and Google Maps, we can actually go and see what it looks like here. So a few pictures, we zoom in here. This is kind of that area of Moville Lower Parish. This is what it looks like. You can go out there to Google Maps, Google Street View, and see what it looks like. Looks like Ireland. Yeah, kind of treeless, I imagine. Or at least low shrubby type trees, kind of windswept, but it looks like a beautiful spot. And this is where we have pretty good records that this is actually where our ancestors lived. And this is, I think, the area where James Cairney was born. There's actually a church here. This is St. Mary's Catholic Church in the Ballybrack area. And so it's within that red area that was highlighted of Moville Lower Parish. And this church is actually there today. It was constructed, so remember James was born in 1835. Construction began on this church in 1839. It was completed in 1855. It's possible that our ancestors actually went to this church. Some of the records of the burials are online. You of course see lots of tombstones there. There's no record of any of our ancestors being buried in this churchyard or any others that we found in the Moville Lower Parish, but it's a possibility. So just maybe you haven't found it yet. And here's another nice picture. This one is interesting because what I think I see in front of us here is actually a field of flax, Flax. Like, are you familiar with flax seed? This is significant simply because one of our ancestors, I believe John, was actually listed in the 1796 Flax Growers Entitlements list in Ireland. He received a spinning wheel. There was some flax growing cooperative, it looks like, where you could get a spinning wheel if you had land and you were growing flax, so as to kind of promote the industry. So one of our ancestors shows up on this list, and as you can see there, or what I think we see there, is flax growing. Somebody there growing flax just like our ancestors did over 200 years ago. So I thought that was kind of neat. So coming to America, as we mentioned before, talking a little bit about here about James, just because it was again lots of interesting ancestors to talk about, but his story. He's pretty well traveled. Born in 1835, died in Minnesota in 1918. Left Inishowen for Scotland around 1845, about age 10, which is right at the height of the Irish potato famine. So it would have made sense for a young kid to be leaving home. And we think he left Scotland for Canada as a young man, probably around 1855. That's kind of oral tradition that tells us that. We haven't been able to find any records that corroborate it. But we do see him showing up and getting married in Canada around 1861. So certainly seems like reasonable that he left Scotland around 1855. Immigrated from Canada to the U.S. in 1879, came down to Morris, and died in 1918. He's buried in Calvary Cemetery. You can go and visit his grave today. So as you can see, he did a lot of traveling around, and like I said, I love maps. So this is Inishowen here on the, as you can kind of see where this blue line begins. You can trace James's immigration over to Scotland. Probably sailed into the port of Glasgow, and then, of course, that was around 1845. 10 years later, as a young man of about 20, we think, he then set sail west for Canada and then on to the United States. So, moving on here, do we have relatives in Ireland and Scotland? The truth is probably, but and we've communicated with a few people, but really we haven't noticed a lot of interest in catching up with old relatives that we have a relationship with 200 years in the past. It's just not kind of that dynamic, but it's interesting to think that we probably have distant relatives over in Ireland and or Scotland. So, finding more information. As I mentioned before, cairneys.org, Dr. Chris Cairney's site, interesting to read through. Also, if you want to get onto Ancestry.com, very simple, please just send me an email. Is probably the easiest way, because what I can then do is respond to that email, put that email in, and send you a site directly from Ancestry. And you can go out and you can actually contribute, that kind of thing. But you could actually go out to Ancestry right now and search on it. It's a public tree. Anybody can see it. But what I can do is make you a contributor as well. We'll hit that in just a second. So there's some other views that are out there. We kind of looked at this one on the left. But I've put some PDFs out there of some documents that I created in the past just to kind of focus on the immigration of, or the movement of the Cairney patriarchs, as well as just a little spotlight here in the lower right on Moville Parish and us on Inishowen. So, getting involved, like I said, you can contact my father, Patrick, or myself. I am on Facebook, Jeremy Cairney, and you can also email me. I'll just leave you with that there at the end. And again, what I would encourage you to do is look around on Ancestry. You find the more that you look at the stuff, if you have the propensity to look at it, you will come up with lots of questions, mysteries that you want to solve, or just kind of getting to know a little bit more about our ancestors. So it's a very humbling and interesting thing. Also, you never know what you're going to find. So go through old boxes. There may be some documents or some artifacts that are kind of interest to the rest of the family. So maybe look around. And what you can also do is you can contribute digital artifacts. You can take pictures of things and upload them to Ancestry. So that's always helpful. And then talk to your relatives, because you may get pieces of information about things that you just that we won't get any other way. And of course, it's always interesting to sit down and talk with folks that you're related to. So last thing about me and my contact information there, I am Jeremy, son of Pat. There's a picture of my big face in Grant Park in Chicago there. And that's my email address, jeremy.carney@gmail.com. You can also find me on Facebook. And thanks for listening, and hopefully see you soon. Bye-bye.